obviously you spent, 33-ish
33
years
yes.
at Exxon?
Right.
That's a really long time to be super loyal to one place, right? What kept you there? What was the thing that you love most about being there?
They paid me on the first of the month,
Always a blessing.
every month.
That's enough to keep you around, I'll tell you that much.
But,
I'll be there.
I think more seriously, energy in the industry that ExxonMobil participates in is essential to human life and human development. I mean, without energy, we'd frankly be living in the Stone Ages.
Right.
And so when I finished business school, I had a choice to work for big banks or accounting firms or automotive companies, but I discovered the energy industry. And through the unique combination of an industry that was rapidly growing and developing, and a company that generally held to its principles of developing people for higher level positions and giving you the responsibilities that were commensurate with your abilities, always felt challenged. I frankly went into a number of jobs, probably most of the second half of my career, and my first comment upon being offered a job was, what me now, why? Because I would have been much more comfortable staying in the same position I'd been in previously.
Right.
So therefore, as you continue to be stretched, you grow, you're in an industry where you feel that you're contributing something to society. And we'll talk about climate change in a moment. But if I can tell just a very quick story, I was offered a job by another company, and I almost took the job, but they told me at the final interview that, we need good people like you because, we take caramel syrup, carbonated water, put it in a can and sell it for $1. And I thought about that and I said, and you can guess, well, you can one of two companies. And I kind of think about that and you say, well, what we work on every day are real human problems. They're complex human problems. They span the gamut of issues affecting the entire planet. They're geopolitical issues that we get involved in. They're financial issues that we get involved in. And so it was just an astoundingly positive environment for intellectual growth and, again, development. And they paid me on the first of the month.
Yeah. Which is always a benefit. Like,
Right.
I'll definitely show up if they're going to pay me on the first of the month.
Right.
So, like, if they're hiring, let me know.
Okay.
I'll show up.
All right.
But, like, one thing I'm very interested in is this idea of leadership and the fact that you were one of the highest ranking African-American at ExxonMobil. Like, that's a huge deal. And you really blazed a trail for so many people. But I have to imagine that trail was not an easy one. There are always so many obstacles and things and even personal challenges within your own mind of, am I ready for this job? Am I qualified to take on this position? What were some of those obstacles you faced, and how did you find yourself getting over them to get to the point where you ended up?
That's a great question, a very interesting question. One of, and I could probably talk about this for quite a long time, but there are a couple of aspects that I think are important as African Americans and as people, and that is that people are people first. And so the first great advice that I received about how to advance my career at ExxonMobil came from a middle-aged gentleman who was a graduate of the University of Mississippi, Ole Miss. And so the biases that I walked into the room with, I'm thinking about Emmett Till, I'm thinking about Medgar Evers, I'm thinking about the state of Mississippi.
Right.
And here's this person, and I could have chosen to either ignore him, to not see him, as we've heard earlier, or to listen to him, because he was forthcoming and he simply embraced me. In a sense, he took me under his wing, and he gave me some great advice. And so part of it was to learn how to accept people as they are, and those people who can overcome their own biases to talk with you. Secondly, we've heard a lot of people talk about their backgrounds. I won't bore you with mine, other than I grew up in an area called Stop Six in Fort Worth, Texas. My father was a retired military veteran who then opened a gas station. And I had great incentive to do well in high school and to go to college because, as he told me, you can always come back to the gas station.
You were like,
And,
bye.
and so before he passed away, one of his proudest moments was after I'd become an executive at Exxon Mobil, and I happened to be home, and he said, hey, why don't you come by the station? And he had his territory manager, the kind of person for the company that he franchised who was around there, and he introduced me to him, and he said, this is my son, Gerald McKelvey, and he's senior corporate reporting advisor for Exxon Mobil. And the territory manager was completely amazed. And my father, who had a 10th grade education, just ate up every
So
second
proud.
of it.
There's nothing like a proud father. That is a fact.
Those are the kinds of things that that can fuel your internal fire and motivation to, frankly, be the best you can be.
Absolutely.
Figure out, there are a lot of times, and Jesse and Steve and others around here, not only the Exxon people, but anyone who's in an organization where you're sitting there at 8 o'clock at night. You're the only one in the office. I mean, black, white, brown, doesn't matter. You're the only one there,
right?
and you're wondering why you're there. And you've got to dig deep and figure out that, tomorrow morning I have something important to deliver to this organization. I either have to deliver it or I need to leave. Right. And so one of the lessons from my own father was you always delivered. You didn't
Always
leave.
deliver. You show up, which is important at the end of the day.
Right.
And so you and I talked a little bit before about mentorship and leadership and how much that meant to you. And it sounds like there were definitely some influential people in your career that kind of did that for you. Sure. Why is it important for you to pay it forward? What are you looking to accomplish with your passion for mentorship?
There are several aspects to the question, but first and foremost, organizations, corporate organizations, even small businesses, have to have succession plans,
right,
or succession plans. And if you are an effective mentor, you actually have the opportunity to influence the corporation's succession plan. Because if you develop effective managers and executives, they will stand to have a better chance of being selected for the most senior positions in the organization. So I, for one, there's some managers, and you all know them, in a sense, they sort of oppress. They keep everyone down. They don't want anyone to even get to the level they are, and they're just not very good people. And then there are managers, I'd like to say like myself, who reveled in the fact that the person who was in this job came up through my organization.
Right.
The lady in this job or the woman in this job came up through my organization.
They nourish
because
and
at some point, if I ever did get to the top of the organization, I wanted to be surrounded by people that I helped to develop into those positions. And so that's why I think mentoring is important. The other aspect, and there's a special need for it in the African American community. I mean, when I joined, quote, corporate America in 1977, I wasn't the first wave of African Americans, but we were close behind. Sort of the first wave of MBA developed or MBA engineer developed African Americans was literally in the late 1960s and early 70s. So by the time I arrived at ExxonMobil in 1977, I was the first African American hired in the organization within ExxonMobil professional who'd ever worked in that organization. So mentoring is especially needed because not only in ExxonMobil, but generally across corporate America, we're a fairly endangered species. We're underrepresented. Even if we were fully represented, we're 13% of the U.S. population, so that says at best 13% of your organization or your management group could be comprised of African Americans. You will always be a minority. If you don't stick together, work together, have some common interests with others who share the same values that you share, you will lose.
Absolutely.
Because the majority opinion, it rules in democracy. It's not democracy in corporations, but the majority opinion does apply, and quite a lot of people abide by it. So I always found strength in numbers. I found comfort in people like Jesse. I find great comfort in people like Steve, who, although a generation younger than me, I could watch his progress and take pride in it rather than withdraw my support or act as if he doesn't exist, because I just didn't think that was an option.
And I'm sure that means so much to any person that you're mentoring, just being able to come up under your wing and learn from all of your experiences.
Right, it's not just
so
Steve,
important.
by the way, but Steve paid the most, so, you know, he got the best
So
development.
he gets the shout out. He gets the shout out is what we're saying. But I think it was, I was reading an interview by one of our speakers earlier, Caroline Clark, and she said something about, as a person of color, it's our responsibility once we make it to the table to reach down and bring someone else up, just so we can continue all of those roads and the journey that we're all on kind of together. You know, we're all literally in this together. So it's really nice to hear that.
Yeah, you have to move it from a platitude. Everybody says reach down, but, you know, unfortunately, so many people just paid lip service to that.
Right.
Because as Steve said, it does take a certain amount of courage. Yes, I was taking risks, in a sense, with my own career. If I spoke up on behalf of another person of color, or of a woman of color, or of a woman to receive a promotion over someone from the majority community. But at the end of the day, as I said, there's strength in numbers, and by bringing them along, it made the whole organization more comfortable for me,
Right.
and in turn for them as they move up in the organization.
Absolutely. You know, I have to ask.
Right.
Because it's a literal hot button topic right now in terms of temperature in the planet, climate change, right? Exxon has been on both sides of the argument in the past. They've, you know, changed, and, you know, they have different perspectives. You being, you know, kind of past your Exxon years, and you've seen a lot of things up close. You said you've been to the ends of the earth to find resources. You see how the world is changing. What's your perspective on climate change, and what do you think we can do or are doing that's going to put us in a good place?
Okay, if I can do this very quickly. So,
Yeah.
so there's, you know, on a subject like this, you can think of it, there's knowledge and then there's belief. And knowledge is based on scientific facts, repetitive, easily to, you know, to actually go back and replicate and see if the effect is the same. And then there's belief. And people can believe anything. I mean, witness the person, you know, I think we call him number 45.
That guy.
I won't call his name.
I got you. The one and only.
Close. And so in the area of climate change, there's an awful lot of knowledge now. There is a consensus in the scientific community that climate change is real. The planet's climate is warming. It's warmer this century than it was last century.
Right.
The big difference between this century and last century is human development, industrial development, the rise of CO2 being produced by human activity and being released into the atmosphere. On the belief side are people that either deny it, and I think my former company was sort of on that side, not that they denied it, but that they said it wasn't scientifically proven.
At certain points.
And
Yeah.
they weren't going to make major policy shifts and they weren't going to recommend major policy shifts to the rest of the planet until it was scientifically proven. I think now they are taking the tack that, yes, it's real, but also let's be sensible. And so let me leave you with this message, a couple of messages as it relates to climate change. We have a tendency to vilify. Let's find a villain and then put all of the responsibility on the villain. So when we all say Exxon Mobil's the evil empire and they're responsible for climate change, we're copping out, we're looking for a villain.
Right.
At the end of the day, Exxon Mobil, the entire energy industry, only produces what is demanded. And the demand for oil and gas or hydrocarbon products is, guess what? Those of you who drive internal combustion engine automobiles, those of you who turn your air conditioners on at home, those of you who like bottled water and plastics, the insulation in your homes. So if we suddenly said we're going to stop consuming energy, all of us,
Right.
we could probably reduce CO2 emissions. But look at what
Right.
kind of life you would lead. Now,
Right.
one more thing to say. Only about 1/3 of the world is really developed at this level. So if we suddenly said there can be no increase in CO2 emissions around the world, what are you telling the undeveloped world, the developing world? What are you telling Africa? Sorry,
Interesting
you
perspective.
can't have automobiles, you can't have air conditioning, you can't have bottled water. They're sovereign nations. They're going to make their decisions based on their ability to afford, their technology set, and the wants and needs of their own people. So we have to balance all of that out. It's not just ExxonMobil. You hear someone say ExxonMobil, just tell them, stop. Because if you get in your car and drive somewhere, you're contributing. So now what can we realistically do? What can we realistically do, at least in the near term? I think technology, I mean, people, I told my wife the other day that by the time I buy my next car, it's probably going to be an electric vehicle.
For sure, yeah. Fans of electric vehicles in the house.
Thank you. Yeah, hang on. Yeah. Well,
The more you know.
To say it differently, thank you for clapping, but recognize that the electricity used to power your electric vehicle comes from a power generation plant, 2/3 of which in the United States run on natural gas, and the other third runs on coal.
The more you know.
Which is the dirtiest of the hydrocarbon fuels. So we've got to work the whole problem. But electric vehicles, turn your thermostats down, more technology, solar power that's coming on, all of it's going to help. Steve talked about what's called CO2 sequestration, capture the CO2, put it in the soil. All of that we'll need, and and I think we can work it, but we got to stop vilifying people and stop trying to identify the whole problem and then work on the entire problem, not just one part of it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.